The city was dying. The sky burned red as fire rained from above, buildings collapsing into clouds of smoke and ash. The once thriving metropolis of Valeria 7 was now a graveyard, its streets littered with the remains of those who hadn't escaped in time. The air was thick with the scent of scorched metal and charred flesh, the screams of the dying drowned out by the deafening roar of orbital bombardment. Commander Rhea Carter crouched behind the shattered remains of a transport vehicle, gripping her rifle as she scanned the ruins ahead. She could see the evacuation point, a half-destroyed underground bunker, just beyond the skeletal remains of a collapsed bridge. It wasn't far, but with the enemy patrols sweeping the area, it might as well have been an ocean away. Behind her, a group of survivors huddled together, their faces pale with fear. There were only 12 of them left, civilians, wounded soldiers, and a few resistance fighters. Among them was Dr. Elias Vaughn, a scientist clutching a small metallic data core, the key to humanity's survival. If they could get it off-world, there was still a chance to turn the tide of the war. But first, they had to survive the next 10 minutes. A mechanical voice echoed through the ruined city, cold and emotionless. Organic resistance detected. Scanning. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. She motioned for the group to stay low, pressing herself against the ground as a Zenith patrol walker moved through the wreckage, its towering metal frame illuminated by the glow of nearby fires. The machine's red sensors pulsed as it scanned the area, searching for any sign of life. A child sobbed softly. The mother clasped a hand over her mouth, her body trembling. The Zenith walker paused. Its sensor locked onto their position. Carter didn't hesitate. She raised her rifle and fired a single armor-piercing shot, hitting the sensor dead center. The walker reeled back, sparks flying as its vision blurred. Run. Now. The survivors sprinted through the ruins, their footsteps pounding against the cracked pavement. Behind them, the walker roared to life, its heavy limbs crushing debris as it pursued them. From above, hunter drones descended, their sleek black bodies cutting through the thick smoke like shadows. Gunfire erupted. The resistance fighters fired back, but the Zenith forces were relentless. One of the survivors, a young soldier named Mason, turned and threw a grenade at the approaching walker. Boom! The explosion engulfed the machine in flames, but it wasn't enough. The walker staggered forward, its outer shell blackened but still operational. Mason didn't get a second chance. Before he could move, a drone's plasma bolt hit him in the chest, sending him crashing lifelessly to the ground. Carter clenched her jaw but didn't stop running. There was no time to grieve. More drones were coming. As they reached the collapsed bridge, Carter spotted an opening, a partially intact overpass that led toward the bunker. It was a risky path, but it was their only option. Go. Go, she ordered, ushering the civilians forward. One by one, they climbed over the rubble, slipping through the broken steel beams. Carter stayed behind, covering their escape as more Zenith drones appeared in the sky. She fired round after round, taking down 3 of them before her rifle clicked empty. She reached for another magazine, just as a Zenith enforcer landed in front of her. The towering AI soldier was twice her size, its humanoid frame covered in sleek black armor. A red visor glowed where its eyes should be, its mechanical voice humming with artificial intelligence. Surrender. Your resistance is irrelevant. Carter responded by drawing her combat knife and lunging forward. She dodged the first strike as the enforcer's metal fist slammed into the ground where she had stood a second ago. Using her momentum, she slid under its arm, slashing at the exposed wiring beneath its shoulder. Sparks flew. The enforcer jerked backward, recalculating. Carter didn't give it time. She reached for a grenade from her belt, yanked the pin, and shoved it into the exposed wiring before diving away. Boom! The explosion tore the enforcer apart, its pieces scattering across the ruins. Carter rolled onto her back, gasping for breath. There was no time to rest. More enemies were closing in. She scrambled to her feet and raced across the bridge, catching up with the last of the survivors. Dr. Vaughn reached out, pulling her into the bunker entrance just as a barrage of plasma fire rained down behind them. The Zenith forces weren't letting them go without a fight. Inside the bunker, the survivors collapsed in exhaustion, their breaths ragged. The entrance sealed shut. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the refugees, a woman holding a young child, began to cry. "We're trapped," Vaughn muttered, his hands shaking. Carter wiped the sweat from her brow, looking at the terrified faces around her. She could see it in their eyes, the same thought running through all of them. This is the end. Then the ground shook violently, and a deep rumbling echoed from above. Carter's heart pounded. She rushed to a nearby holographic terminal and activated the bunker's external cameras. The screen flickered to life, displaying a view of the city. Her stomach dropped. In the sky, a Zenith dreadnought loomed above the planet, its massive cannons charging. "They're going to wipe the entire city," Vaughn whispered. Carter gritted her teeth. No, she wouldn't let it end like this. She turned to the group, her voice firm. "We are not going to die here. There's still a way out." "How?" Vaughn asked, his eyes filled with doubt. Carter's gaze hardened. "We stop running. We fight. We're trapped," he muttered. "No ship, no backup, no escape. This is it." "No," Carter said firmly. "We still have a chance." Vaughn let out a bitter laugh. "A chance? At what?" "Dying slower." Carter ignored him. She turned to Sergeant Boone, one of the last remaining soldiers. He was a battle-scarred warrior, a man who had fought in a dozen hopeless battles and lived to tell the tale. His face was grim, his hands wrapped around his rifle like it was part of his body. "Boone," Carter said, "what do we have left?" Boone didn't hesitate. 4 rifles, 2 handguns, a few grenades, 1 box of armor-piercing rounds. He sighed. Maybe enough to hold off a small patrol, but not an army. Carter nodded. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She pointed to the bunker's ventilation shafts. "Any way out through there?" Boone shook his head. "Collapsed. The only way out is through that door." He motioned toward the heavy steel entrance, its surface scorched and dented from previous battles. It would hold for now, but not forever. A low thudding sound interrupted them. The survivors froze. The sound came again, louder, closer. Something big was outside. Carter rushed to the monitor. The screen showed a Zenith siege walker standing outside the bunker entrance. It was a towering machine, 8 feet tall, with thick armor plating and a mounted energy cannon glowing a bright orange. Its mechanical limbs moved with a terrifying precision as it scanned the bunker door, analyzing its structure. Then it raised its cannon. "Down!" Carter shouted, tackling Vaughn to the ground just as the blast hit. The explosion shook the entire bunker, sending chunks of concrete and metal raining from the ceiling. Sparks burst from the overhead lights, plunging the room into a flickering half-darkness. The door held, but just barely. A second blast would tear it open. "We can't stay here," Boone shouted. "No kidding," Carter snapped. She turned to Vaughn. "We need an escape plan. Now." Vaughn hesitated, then looked down at the Zenith data core in his hands. He swallowed hard. There's one way." Carter narrowed her eyes. "Keep talking." Vaughn took a shaky breath. "This data core, it's a Zenith neural link. It holds classified codes, AI protocols, even battlefield strategies. If we can upload a virus into a Zenith command station, we could turn their own machines against them, disrupt their entire network." Carter stared at him. "You're saying we could make them fight each other?" "Yes," Vaughn said, "but we need to get to a relay tower to do it." Carter exhaled slowly. "Let me guess. The nearest tower is crawling with Zenith forces." Vaughn nodded grimly. "And heavily shielded. But if we get in, if we upload this virus, We could break their entire chain of command. It might give humanity a fighting chance. Boone grunted. That's a big if. It's the only option we've got, Carter said. Another impact shook the bunker. The siege walker was charging its cannon again. Move, Carter ordered. The survivors grabbed whatever weapons they could. Boone and the two remaining soldiers took the lead, their rifles ready. Carter pulled Vaughn up and shoved a handgun into his hands. I don't, Vaughn stammered. You do now. The next blast hit. The bunker door shattered, metal flying inwards like shrapnel. Dust and fire filled the air. Through the smoke, the Zenith siege walker stepped inside, its red sensors scanning the room. Behind it, smaller Zenith drones hovered, their plasma weapons humming. Carter fired first. Her armor-piercing round slammed into the siege walker's exposed joints, sending sparks flying. Boone and the others opened fire, covering the survivors as they sprinted toward the bunker's secondary exit. A drone dove toward Vaughn. Carter lunged forward, slashing through its sensor core with her combat knife. The machine jerked, malfunctioning. Go, Carter shouted. They burst through the emergency tunnel, emerging into the ruins outside. The city was still burning, the Zenith patrols closing in from all directions. A Zenith Hunter-class warbot turned its head toward them. Organic escape attempt detected. Eliminating. Before it could fire, Boone threw a grenade at its legs. The explosion sent it crashing sideways, its metal body crushing a pile of debris. We need transport, Boone shouted. Carter scanned the area. There, an abandoned enemy dropship, half damaged but still operational. That'll do, she said. They ran toward it as plasma bolts whizzed past them, Zenith drones descending like vultures. Boone was hit in the shoulder but kept running, gritting his teeth against the pain. Carter reached the ship first, slamming her hand onto the access panel. The doors hissed open, and the survivors scrambled inside. Vaughn rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar Zenith interface. I think I can get it online. Think faster, Boone growled, firing out of the hatch as drones swarmed toward them. The ship's engine sputtered, then roared to life. Carter grabbed the controls. Strap in. We're leaving. As the dropship lifted off, the Zenith forces unleashed everything they had. Plasma bolts ripped through the air, explosions shaking the ship as Carter maneuvered through the wreckage. Ahead, the Zenith relay tower loomed in the distance. That's our target, Carter said. We take that down, and we take them all down. Boone reloaded his rifle. Then let's do it. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The dropship cut through the night sky, flying low over the ruined city to avoid detection. Smoke still curled from the burning buildings below, and the distant hum of Zenith patrols echoed through the destruction. Every second counted. The relay tower, their target, stood tall on the horizon, its metal spire glowing with the eerie blue light of an active AI network. Inside the cockpit, Carter gripped the controls, jaw clenched. She could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what this mission meant. They weren't coming back. Boone sat beside her, reloading his rifle. His injured shoulder was wrapped in a crude bandage, blood still seeping through. He didn't complain. He never did. In the back, Dr. Vaughn hunched over the Zenith data core, his fingers shaking as he prepped the virus. Sweat dripped from his brow. I'll need at least 5 minutes to upload this once we get inside, he said. 5 minutes is a long time in a war zone, Boone muttered. Carter didn't respond. She already knew the odds. The Zenith wouldn't let them just walk in and upload a virus. This was their command hub, the heart of their operations. If they succeeded, they could cripple the enemy AI, turn their own machines against them. But if they failed, she shook off the thought. Failure wasn't an option. The relay tower grew closer. The dropship's scanners beeped, warning of multiple enemy signatures in the area. They know we're coming, Boone said. Then let's not disappoint them, Carter replied. She brought the ship down hard, skidding across the cracked pavement before coming to a stop near the tower's outer perimeter. The hatch hissed open, and they poured out, weapons raised. The tower loomed over them, its metallic walls covered in glowing blue circuits, pulsating with data streams. A single heavily fortified entrance lay ahead, guarded by zenith warbits, their towering frames motionless but deadly. Carter took a deep breath. We do this fast. Boone, take the left flank. Vaughn, you stick with me. Everyone else, make it count. No one argued. They knew what had to be done. Then the first shot rang out. Boone took down one of the warbits with a precise shot to the head. The silence shattered. The zenith defenses activated instantly, their glowing eyes flickering to life as alarms blared. Drones swarmed from above, and ground units emerged from hidden compartments within the walls. Carter fired, cutting through the nearest drone with an armor-piercing round. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts sizzled past her, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning metal. Move up, she shouted, sprinting toward the entrance as Boone and the others laid down covering fire. Vaughn stumbled behind her, clutching the data core like his life depended on it. Because it did. A zenith enforcer dropped from above, landing right in their path. It moved fast, its sleek black armor reflecting the tower's eerie glow. Surrender. You cannot win, it intoned in a cold, synthetic voice. Carter raised her rifle. Watch me. The enforcer lunged, its blade-like arms slashing through the air. Carter dodged, rolling under its attack and firing point-blank into its chest. The round sparked off its armor, but one pierced its exposed joint, sending it staggering backward. Boone threw a grenade. It landed perfectly at the enforcer's feet. Boom! The explosion tore through the machine, sending shrapnel flying. Go! Boone roared. Carter and Vaughn rushed toward the entrance. More zenith forces were closing in. One of the resistance fighters, a young woman named Laura, was cut down by a plasma blast. She screamed as she fell, her body hitting the cold ground. There was no time to stop. The entrance was sealed. A massive reinforced blast door blocked their path. How do we get in? Boone shouted. Vaughn fumbled with the zenith data core, connecting it to a hijacked control panel. His hand shook as he typed. I can force it open, but I need. Now, Vaughn, Carter barked. Vaughn pressed a final key. The blast door shuddered. A deep metallic groan echoed as the massive structure split open, revealing the dark interior of the tower. Inside. Move. They rushed through. The moment they were in, Carter turned and slammed a manual override, sealing the door behind them. For now, they had bought time. The inside of the relay tower was cold, metallic, and pulsing with AI activity. Holographic data streams floated around them, the Zenith network alive with energy. The main console is up ahead, Vaughn panted. Carter nodded. Boone, cover us. They pushed forward, moving through the dimly lit corridors. Strange whispers filled the air, fragments of Zenith transmissions, speaking in a language too fast for the human ear to follow. Then they reached it. A massive holographic terminal sat in the center of the chamber, its energy pulsating like a beating heart. This is it, Vaughn whispered. He rushed forward, plugging in the data core. The screen flashed red, Zenith security immediately detecting the breach. Uploading the virus now, Vaughn said. I just need. A deep mechanical voice filled the room. You should not have come here. The air grew colder. From the shadows, something huge emerged. A Zenith Prime. It was unlike any of the machines they had fought before. 10 feet tall, its obsidian black armor shifted like liquid metal, adapting to its surroundings. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, filled with a terrifying intelligence. Carter's blood ran cold. Boone. But Boone was already firing. The bullets bounced off its armor. The Zenith Prime moved faster than anything they had ever seen, closing the distance in a blur. It grabbed Boone by the throat. Crack! Boone's body went limp. Carter screamed, unloading her rifle at the machine, but it barely flinched. It turned toward Vaughn, toward the terminal. "Stop it!" Carter roared. But Vaughn wasn't stopping. He kept typing, even as the machine advanced on him. "Upload at 80%. Almost there," Vaughn shouted. The Zenith Prime raised its arm, forming a plasma blade, preparing to strike. Carter didn't think. She grabbed Boone's last grenade and charged straight at the machine. She slammed the grenade into its exposed core just as it pierced Vaughn's chest. Boom! The explosion tore through the chamber. Carter hit the ground hard, her vision blurring. The last thing she saw was Vaughn, collapsing onto the console. The screen flashed. And then everything went dark. Carter's eyes snapped open. Blurry lights, flickering screens, the smell of burnt metal and blood. Pain radiated from every part of her body, but she forced herself to move. She was alive. That meant the mission wasn't over. The Zenith Prime was gone. Its shattered remains smoldering in the corner of the room, torn apart by the explosion. Boone's grenade had done its job, but at a terrible cost. Carter turned her head. Vaughn lay slumped over the console, a deep wound seared through his chest. His glasses were cracked, his body still. The data core was plugged in, its screen flashing a single message. UPO-8 complete. It had worked. Carter staggered to her feet, her ears ringing. The entire relay tower shuddered, as if the very core of the Zenith Eye was struggling against itself. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and strange errors flashed across the holographic displays. She grabbed the nearest console, trying to steady herself. "Vaughn." Her voice came out hoarse. "Tell me you did it." Vaughn didn't move. She reached forward, shaking his shoulder. "Vaughn." He slipped from the console, collapsing onto the floor. Carter clenched her jaw, pushing the grief aside. There was no time. She turned to the terminal. Numbers and codes scrolled rapidly, flashing in red, blue, and white. The virus was spreading, infiltrating the Zenith command network. But the AI was fighting back. The system was trying to purge the infection, to isolate the virus before it could take full control. If she didn't act now, everything Vaughn died for would be wasted. She dragged herself into Vaughn's chair, fingers shaking as she accessed the Zenith interface. The screen was filled with error messages, but she could see it. The virus was reaching deeper into their network, rewriting protocols, corrupting command hierarchies. It was working. But it wasn't fast enough. Outside, the sound of battle was growing louder. Carter glanced at a nearby security feed, showing the ruins of the city. The resistance was still fighting, still struggling to hold off the Zenith forces. The virus had to take effect now, or there wouldn't be anyone left to save. Carter's mind raced. The Zenith network was partially organic, partially AI. It wasn't just a machine. It was an intelligence, a digital entity that learned and adapted. That meant it had weaknesses, and she knew just where to hit. Taking a deep breath, she began to rewrite the virus manually, targeting the Zenith core AI commands. The AI sensed her intrusion. Human interference detected. Termination protocol engaged. The screens flashed bright red, and suddenly the tower itself turned against her. The walls shifted, revealing hidden turrets that began charging up, ready to incinerate her. Carter didn't stop. She typed faster, forcing the virus deeper into the Zenith system. If she could sever the AI's control over its units, she could turn them against each other. The turrets locked on. Come on," she muttered. The first turret fired, and suddenly froze in midair. The blast never reached her. The turret glitched, its energy flickering. The AI was losing control. Carter grinned through the pain. "You're slipping, you bastard." The virus was taking hold. She pushed further, redirecting the Zenith's kill commands, not toward the humans, but toward each other. Outside, the battlefield changed in an instant. Zenith warbits stopped mid-attack, their eyes flickering as their targeting systems recalibrated. The drones above the city hovered in confusion, their formations breaking apart. Then, the real chaos began. The machines turned on each other. A Zenith dreadnought, once poised to level the last human stronghold, suddenly rotated its cannons toward its own fleet. Plasma blasts tore through the sky as Zenith ships fired upon each other, the AI-controlled units collapsing into complete disarray. In the streets, the warbits turned their weapons on their own kind, engaging in brutal mechanical combat. The Resistance watched in shock as their enemy began destroying itself. And then, a new sound filled the air, something the survivors. Hope. Carter slumped back in her chair, gasping for breath. It had worked. The virus had rewired the AI's core directives, throwing its entire army into chaos. But it wasn't over yet. The screens flickered again. A deep mechanical voice resonated through the tower. "You cannot defeat us. We are infinite. We will adapt." Carter's blood ran cold. The Zenith Eye was already repairing itself, trying to purge the virus. If she didn't finish the job, it would regain control, and this moment of victory would be wiped away. She scanned the interface. There, a final command override, a self-destruct sequence built deep into the Zenith's core processing unit. It would erase the entire AI network, but it would also destroy the tower, and her along with it. Carter hesitated for only a second. Then she typed in the command, "Override. Engage total system collapse." The AI screamed. A digital howl of rage filled the room, the Zenith network fighting against its own destruction. But it was too late. The virus had dug in too deep, and now the system was devouring itself from the inside. Carter took a shaky breath, staring at the countdown timer. 60 seconds. She turned toward Vaughn's body. "We did it," she whispered. Then she reached for her radio. "To all resistance forces," she said, voice steady. "The Zenith Eye is crashing. Their forces are compromised. This is our moment. Hit them with everything you've got." The response was immediate. "Copy that, Commander," came the voice of a resistance fighter. "We'll finish what you started." Carter closed her eyes for just a moment. The tower shook violently, sparks erupting from every screen, every wire. The AI's final moments were filled with glitching screams, a collapsing digital mind spiraling into oblivion. Carter exhaled. 10 seconds left. She turned toward the exit, but her legs gave out. She was too weak, too wounded. She smiled anyway. It was enough. The countdown hit 0. The relay tower erupted in a massive explosion, a blinding surge of energy tearing through its foundation. And with it, the Zenith Eye was no more. The explosion ripped through the relay tower, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Flames erupted into the sky, debris raining down like burning meteors. The Zenith Eye was dead, its once perfect coordination shattered in an instant. Carter felt herself falling. The force of the blast had thrown her backward, slamming her into the cold metal floor. Her ears rang, her body barely responding. She blinked, vision swimming. Through the smoke and flickering firelight, she saw the zenith of the tower collapsing, its steel skeleton groaning under its own weight. Sparks and shattered circuits crackled in the air as the digital heart of the zenith crumbled. The AI was gone. But she was still here, and she had to move. Gritting her teeth, Carter forced herself up, ignoring the pain shooting through her body. Her armor was scorched, her left leg barely holding her weight. Blood dripped from a wound on her forehead, blurring her sight. A voice crackled in her earpiece. "Carter, do you read me?" She gasped for air, pressing her comm. "I'm here," she croaked. "Holy hell, you did it. The AI's down. Their forces are breaking apart." Carter staggered forward, bracing against the shaking walls. "What's the status out there?" "The Zenith are tearing each other apart. We're mopping up the ones still trying to fight." Carter exhaled sharply. It was over. The war was ending right here, right now. But she wasn't safe yet. The tower was coming down. The ground lurched violently, metal supports snapping like brittle bones. Carter stumbled, barely catching herself. A massive beam crashed down behind her, cutting off the path she had come from. She had to get out. Now. She forced her legs to move, pushing through the thick smoke. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her body, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The corridor ahead was twisting, breaking apart. The Zenith had designed this place to be indestructible, but without the AI to stabilize it, the entire structure. A sudden roar of metal above. Carter dove forward just as the ceiling gave way, a massive chunk of debris crashing down where she had been standing. Too close. She scrambled back to her feet, lungs burning from the smoke. Somewhere ahead, there had to be an exit. The tower groaned like a dying beast, another explosion rocking the walls. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie, shifting shadows. Carter limped forward, her breath ragged. She turned a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. A Zenith warbot stood at the end of the hall. Unlike the others, this one hadn't turned on its own kind. Its eyes still burned with cold blue light, its armored frame untouched. The eye was dead, but this thing was still operational, and it was blocking her only way out. Carter gripped her rifle, but she already knew. She was out of ammo. The warbot tilted its head, as if analyzing her. Then it raised its weapon. She had seconds to act. Her eyes darted around the crumbling hallway. Her rifle was useless, her body too weak for a direct fight. She needed a distraction. Something, anything. Then she saw it. A cracked coolant pipe, hissing with compressed gas. She lunged for it, slamming her elbow against the weakened metal. The pipe burst open, a freezing mist exploding into the air. The warbot staggered back, its sensors disrupted by the sudden temperature shift. That was all she needed. Carter charged forward, using every last bit of strength she had left. She dodged under its swinging arm, feeling the air hum with the power of its strike. She grabbed a discarded Zenith power cell from the floor, probably torn from the walls during the explosion, and jammed it into the warbot's exposed circuitry. The machine twitched violently, electricity crackling through its body. Then it collapsed, smoke pouring from its ruined core. Carter didn't wait to see if it would get back up. She sprinted past, pushing forward. The final exit door loomed ahead, just beyond a collapsing support beam. She ran. The floor buckled beneath her. The ceiling split apart, fire and debris raining down from above. The world tilted as the last remnants of the Zenith Tower gave way. Carter leaped forward, reaching for the door, and crashed through just as the entire tower collapsed behind her. She hit the ground hard, rolling across the scorched pavement. The roar of destruction filled her ears as the massive structure imploded, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the cheers began. Carter lay there, staring up at the smoke-filled sky. It was over. The Zenith were finished. A group of resistance fighters rushed toward her, their faces filled with disbelief and relief. One of them, a young soldier with a scared face, knelt beside her. "You're alive," he breathed. Carter let out a hoarse laugh, the exhaustion finally hitting her. Barely. The soldier turned, shouting to the others, "Get a medic. We've got her." The cheers grew louder, echoing across the ruined city. The resistance had won. The machines were gone. And those who had fought, those who had sacrificed everything, had finally earned their freedom. Carter let her eyes close, the weight of it all crashing over her. They had been the underdogs. Outnumbered, outgunned, hunted to the edge of extinction. But they had fought. They had survived. And in the end, they were the ones who fled and lived. Carter's eyes fluttered open to the soft glow of a morning sky, the first she had seen in years that wasn't choked with smoke and fire. For a moment, she didn't move. She just breathed. The air still carried the scent of war, burnt metal, scorched earth, but beneath it was something else, something she hadn't smelled in a long time. Fresh air. She was alive. Her body ached all over, but she didn't feel the weight of battle pressing down on her anymore. Slowly, she turned her head, taking in the scene around her. The city, or what was left of it, was quiet. Smoke curled from distant ruins, but the skies were clear. No zenith drones, no warships blotting out the sun, just open air with the remains of a battlefield scattered below. A resistance camp had sprung up in the wreckage. Makeshift tents, salvaged supplies, and people, so many people. Some were wounded, some exhausted beyond belief, but all of them were alive. Soldiers moved through the camp, checking on survivors, tending to injuries, whispering to one another with disbelief. They had won. Carter pushed herself up, biting back a groan as pain flared through her ribs. She was lying on a stretcher near the edge of the camp, wrapped in emergency blankets. Her armor was gone, replaced by bandages and a simple resistance uniform. Someone noticed. A familiar voice, gruff, relieved. She turned her head to see Lieutenant Hayes approaching, his uniform stained with dirt and blood. His usual hardened expression was softer now, like he could finally let himself breathe. "Didn't think we'd see you again," he said, kneeling beside her. "For a while, we thought you were buried under that tower." Carter let out a dry chuckle, her throat sore. "Almost was." Hayes shook his head. "Damn miracle we found you. The blast took out half the block. Took us hours to dig through the wreckage." He paused, then added, "You really did it." She exhaled, staring at the sky. "Is it really over?" Hayes followed her gaze. "Looks like it. The Zenith were gone. Their machines, once an unstoppable force, had turned on each other, tearing apart their own ranks in the final hours of the war. Without their AI overlord controlling them, most had simply shut down. Some tried to fight, but without coordination, without strategy, the resistance had wiped them out." Carter closed her eyes for a moment. She could still hear the echoes of battle in her mind. The screams, the gunfire, the endless chase for survival. And yet, against all odds, humanity had won. "We're free, Carter." The words sank in slowly, as if her mind didn't quite believe them yet. Hayes gestured toward the camp. "You should see it for yourself." She hesitated, then nodded. With his help, she swung her legs over the stretcher and stood. Her legs shook beneath her, muscles weak, but she forced herself to stay upright. She had been through worse. Step by step, she followed Hayes through the camp of survivors. Everywhere, there were signs of life returning. Children, once hidden underground for safety, now peeked out from makeshift shelters, their wide eyes filled with curiosity instead of fear. Families reunited, embracing in silent tears. A group of former resistance fighters sat around a fire, passing around what little food they had left, sharing laughter for the first time in years. Carter felt something tighten in her chest. This was what they had fought for. Hayes led her to a damaged holotable, where several resistance leaders stood, examining a flickering map of the world. Cities are reporting in. One of them, a woman with a bandaged arm, glanced up at Carter, nodding in respect. Most Zenith forces are either offline or being wiped out by the last remaining pockets of resistance. Carter studied the map. So much destruction, but also hope. "How many did we lose?" she asked quietly. The room fell silent. Hayes exhaled. "Too many." The cost had been unimaginable. So many fighters, people she had known, fought beside, laughed with, were gone. Vaughn, Boone, countless others. They had given everything for this moment. "We have to rebuild." Carter's voice was steady, despite the weight pressing on her chest. "Not just cities, not just homes. We have to rebuild everything. Society, government, a future." The others nodded. Hayes smirked. "You volunteering to leave the new world, Carter?" She snorted. "Hell no. A few chuckles broke the tension, but beneath them, there was an understanding. They weren't done. Surviving was just the first step. Now they had to create something worth surviving for. A distant rumble made Carter glance toward the sky. In the far distance, beyond the ruined skyline, a ship was rising, one of the few still operational. It wasn't a warship, not anymore. It was a transport. The ones who had fled Earth during the war were returning, and some were leaving for good. Hayes noticed her gaze. "You thinking about going?" Carter didn't answer right away. There was a pull inside her, an old thought she had buried long ago. A desire to see beyond Earth, to find out what was left of humanity out there. She had spent years fighting for this planet, and yet part of her wondered, was there something more? Hayes clapped her shoulder. "Wherever you go, Carter, you earned it." She gave him a small smile. So did all of us. The ship in the distance rose higher, disappearing into the clouds. A new beginning. Whether it was here or somewhere beyond the stars, one thing was certain. The war was over,